Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried & Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. Thank you once again for joining in. I can't thank you enough for all your support. I also would like to thank our sponsors, Siegfried & Jensen, Wasatch Recovery, and Veracity Networks. Thank you so much for believing in me. I can't tell you how much that means, and it's going to help get these amazing stories out to so many more people. And I also like to thank all the guests that have been on my show. You guys are amazing, and that's why we're successful, is because of you, and you come on and you get vulnerable and you share your stories, and it's just mind-blowing stuff. And today's no different. Today we're joined by Danny Shelton. Danny, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. So Danny, you are the owner of D&D Fitness and Nutrition, right? And we'll talk about how that all came to pass and all that. But you spent most of your life feeling uncomfortable in your own skin, not feeling good enough, which ultimately threw you into a drug addiction and other self-defeating behaviors. It's interesting how common that just is. Like, I'm just not good enough, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to get into that. You're really big into health and fitness. It's your passion. You know, I've done a lot of research on you, and I love just what you're doing. I admire your work, and I just love your drive and passion to make a difference in this world.
You know, I mean, truthfully, I think that was probably one of the biggest turning points when it comes to my recovery. Is, I mean, a lot of us get into recovery, and the concentration's 100% recovery.
Right.
And the biggest transition in my life, I think, was going from 100% recovery to, hey, I'm actually really passionate about this other thing, and I don't have to neglect my recovery to do it. So let's do that. And all of a sudden, just the horizon started opening, and wow. I just found that passion, and it was awesome, man.
That is cool. You know, I heard it once said by a friend of mine, Simon Sinek. He says, if you master the first 11 steps of AA, you'll drink again. If you master step 12, you'll never touch another drop.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really what you're doing. At the end of the day, you're giving back. You're trying to make a difference, and it fuels your fire, keeps you on the right track and all that stuff. So, again, I really do admire what you do. And we're going to get into this amazing story from Danny, but I want to also, let's start, where did you grow up, and tell us a little bit about your family life.
All right, man. So, you know, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people in our community tend to have very traumatic upbringings. I am not that person. I don't. I actually grew up in an incredible household. Today, I still have an incredible relationship with my parents. So I grew up in a very LDS household, okay? And now when I say LDS, I'm sure the listeners are familiar with the LDS religion, but my family, and my father in particular, took it kind of to the next level, is probably the best way that I would describe that. I remember pretty vividly, like Sundays, we could not go to friends' houses. We could not grocery shop. We could not watch television. We were only allowed to read scripture and read church literature like The Friend or The Ensign or The New Era. So I remember from a very young age not enjoying Sundays at all. And so I was, you know, I was a pretty good kid, but you know, from a very young age started feeling, you know, very resentful and very rebellious towards this very, very strict household that I was in. Again, not to ever say anything bad about my parents, because they did the best they could. They 100% went off of, you know, this is very similar to how my dad was raised, and he was just trying to, you know, emulate those same values that he was taught in a similar way. But, you know, looking at it now, you know, I felt very uncomfortable, and I just remember from a very young age feeling like I wasn't good enough because I had all of these rules and I had all of these standards in my life. and it just felt like I could never adhere to them.
Yeah.
Like every time I'm going through and it's just like, okay, well, you did your chores, but we got to fix this, this, and this. And you did this, but did you get an hour of scripture study in today? And you did. And I'm just like, man, and so then
can't keep up.
No, not even a little bit. You just feel like, okay, this is awful. And so by the time 13 or 14 comes around, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to do any of this anymore. So it all just kind of goes out the window, and I'm just like, okay, now I'm going to be rebellious. And it's funny because I didn't start using any substances yet. Where I grew up in Utah County, it's pretty difficult to come across, man. Like it's not quite the same as Salt Lake.
Right.
Salt Lake, there's so much stuff around. Like you can find anything, right?
Right.
Utah County is a very, very conservative county. It was more difficult, and so I was still drug and alcohol free through high school, but I got extremely rebellious, and I remember that this is probably when the first signs of extreme narcissism and arrogance started coming around.
Really?
That was my defense mechanism.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel okay, right? I didn't feel happy or comfortable.
Right.
But the way for me to show you that I was okay was to make you feel bad about yourself, so that then all of a sudden I look like I'm a rock star. And it's taken many, many years of therapy and all these things to finally get to the point where I realized that that's what was going on. But the best way to describe me as a teenager was an arrogant prick. That's honestly like all that I was. I was a douchebag, and I just did not treat people well. I was not kind. And as a result, I ended up, it's weird because I look at it now and I lived this life where I didn't have any friends, but I was constantly pretending how many friends I had.
Yeah.
And I wasn't popular, but I was constantly telling people how popular I was. And everything was just this weird facade that did not make any sense. And it was not working. You know what I mean? Like it was rough. Okay. So, that's kind of what high school looked like. It was not good. It was funny. Darcy, my fiance, asked me if I would ever go to a high school reunion. I was like, are you kidding me? No.
They'd be like, there's Danny.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, people would be like, oh, avoid that guy. Like, there's no way I would go to a high school reunion. I was like, everybody's got embarrassing high school stories.
Right.
Guys, mine is so much worse. I was so unkind to so many people. Like, I can't even imagine acting that way towards anybody anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what high school looked like for me. Now, again, as you can imagine, with such a structured home,
right,
there was no way I was going to stay there. And so I graduated high school a year early so that I could move out. And I moved out of my house at the age of 17.
Okay.
I wanted, obviously with roommates because you can't get an apartment, but I had a job. I wanted out. I wanted some freedom, and realized very quickly that it's really hard to make money and have a living when you're not living at mom and dad's and you're 17 years old.
Yeah.
And so there are a couple of things that I tried to do, because this is also when you start seeing my very, very, very codependent behavior start coming out.
Right.
Part of my story is I've actually been married and divorced 3 times. I got married at the age of 18. I got married at the age of 19. I got married again at the age of 23.
Are you serious?
100%.
Just back to back to back.
Yeah. And it was just, it's kind of a weird correlation of I wanted to feel exclusively loved for who I was.
Yeah.
And I wanted that person to feel obligated to love me. That was, honestly, like that's what I wanted. I wanted you to love me no matter what. I didn't want you to have a choice about loving me. I wanted you to love me, period. But unfortunately, I'm also in that situation where I need that validation for other people. From other people. And so I was unable to be faithful in any of these relationships. I was so codependent, and I needed that love and affection wherever I could get it. Like I couldn't live without it, and there was never enough. And it's the most unhealthy form of codependency that you can find.
Yeah.
But it's so common amongst this community, and it's okay to talk about. Like, this is how I was feeling. I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I felt like I wasn't loved. And at the time, the only solution I had, frankly, was sex. And that's so unhealthy. Like I look at that now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I treated these poor women that way.
Yeah.
But frankly, that's where I was. And so I went through and I got married. And I got married to a young lady. We got it annulled after 3 months, okay? And then I go through and I get engaged to another young lady. And, I'm trying to do the LDS thing at this point. And so I go through and I actually ended up getting married in the Salt Lake Temple. I had no business being in the Salt Lake Temple. I wasn't being faithful to my fiance at the time. Her and I were having an intimate relationship. I was having intimate relationships with other people. I had no business being in there. But I wanted the validation. I wanted my family to see that.
Just say, good job.
Yeah, just give me that, oh, you did the right thing. Yeah. Awesome, that's great. That's what I wanted. That mattered to me. And then, as you can imagine, that marriage lasted 5-6 months, and then we ended up getting divorced. And so, but before the marriage happened, so between marriage 1 and marriage 2, I actually enlisted into the military.
Okay.
And so that was my get out of jail free card. I'd kind of ruined my credit trying to be a 17-year-old on my own.
Okay.
And I wanted money. And at the time, this is when the conflict in Iraq was just getting ramped up. We'd been in Afghanistan for probably 5 or 6 years at the time.
Okay.
And they were offering $40,000 sign-on bonuses to join the Army. They needed people. And so I went through and I got the sign-on bonus. It's funny, I'm super honest with people and telling them, I did not join the military because I was patriotic. I did not join the military because I was trying to help anybody. I joined the military for a sign-on bonus. That's it. I'm not a hero. I didn't do anything heroic. I was not trying to give my life for anybody else. I was just trying to get paid. That's honestly what it is. And so I went through and I joined the military, and the biggest gift that I got from the military, aside from that $40,000 sign-on bonus, was some PTSD. And so this is when the journey starts getting just a little bit crazy, which is crazy because it's already a pretty crazy life. I'm 2 marriages down, and it's still been pretty rough, right? But at this point, I'm still sober. Then I get the PTSD diagnosis, and the biggest solution for PTSD is they start medicating the crap out of you.
Right.
And so I'm on just a plethora of medications. They try the temazepam, the lorazepam. I couldn't sleep, so I was on Ambien and Xanax and Adderall, and there was always something there to help me feel better. If I'm feeling anxious, here's this. If I'm feeling drowsy or depressed, then here's this, right? And then I realized that this is still 2011, 12. The opioid epidemic is something that we kind of know about, but it's not in full swing. You can still get away with a lot of stuff with some of your doctors, man.
Yeah, back then, for sure.
There was still, today there's no way. But back then, I go into the doctor's office with a headache, they're sending me out with Percocet if I ask for it, period. Yeah, right. And so I started realizing that, okay, these are the meds that I like. And if I ask this doctor, and this doctor for these medications, then I can get more of them.
Get them. Yeah,
right?
Right.
And so that's what I did. I started doctor shopping, and that's when things started getting a little bit crazy. But at the time, I was still, I maintained a job, which was cool. Still kind of, for the most part, paying my bills. Okay. I think the biggest way that you can tell that something is wrong is again, my relationships.
Right.
I'm estranged from my family temporarily. My marriages and my relationships with women are just so volatile. It's just, what I mean? Where it's
for sure.
There's I've been with my fiance now for 2.5 years, and we have our moments, right? Sure. But it's probably 50, maybe 40% really happy, maybe 40% pretty neutral, and maybe 20% where it's just oh, this is rough. You know what I mean? And that's
just being honest.
Yeah, that's pretty normal. But these relationships were just oh my gosh, I love you. I'm gonna kill you. Oh my gosh, I love you. Throwing stuff at each other and oh my gosh, it was insane, man. just police getting called and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's like, for me, that's what I look at. And when that's kind of how I recognize when I'm in a downward trajectory.
Yeah. Right.
Is when my relationships start to struggle. I have to recognize it's probably me, because that's the first thing that goes for me. Right. Yeah. And so I'm going through, my relationships are a mess. Everything's crazy. Everything's wild. And then, all my prescriptions get cut off at once. And which is pretty normal. You can get away with doctor shopping for a certain amount of time,
and then they catch on eventually.
And it's over, man.
Yeah.
And it was done. And up until this point, I'm 23, 24 years old. I did not actually realize that I was not going to feel well when I didn't have these drugs. My assumption was that I was going to be able to just stop.
Yeah.
Whenever I wanted. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I've got this under control. I'm drinking a case of beer every night and taking 15 or 20 different pills every day. It's fine. It's
right.
fine.
Hey,
everything's fine. And then the very next day is when I realized that that was not the case.
Yeah.
I started getting sick. I started feeling uncomfortable. And this is when my soiree with street drugs started. Because I've got a pretty long history of being addicted to heroin, methamphetamines, and alcohol, and so that's when the heroin and meth started, and that's also when everything just absolutely went to pieces. Lost my job, didn't have a desire to go to work. I'm at this, sold everything that I could to get more stuff, and then I spent probably a year and a half, almost 2 years, being physically homeless in the downtown West Valley area. And I mean, we're talking like walking the streets during the day, and sometimes I could scrape together enough money to get a hotel room, and sometimes I was sleeping on the sidewalk, man. Wow. Like that's legitimately how it was. My mom, I've actually told this story a couple times with my mom, and it's really emotional for me, because she goes through and she talks about how every weekend for probably 3-4 months straight, she would go to the downtown area at night, and she would just go and walk around and look for me, just to see if she could find me. My mom didn't hear from me for years. Wow. And had no idea if I was dead or alive.
You were dead, right?
Yeah. She had no idea. And so, but yeah, she would drive down to the downtown area just to make sure that, just to see if she could find me, hoping that she could at least, buy me a meal or something. But the thing that ended up getting me sober, unfortunately, is that when you're in that lifestyle and you just get so desperate, sometimes there's crime attached to that, right? Yeah. And so I ended up doing numerous stints in jail with drug charges and petty theft charges and things like that. And then I got a felony. And it was funny, because it was a felony that it's because you get away with so many things that could have been felonies. Right. And then it ended up being the one thing that technically I didn't think was a felony when I was doing it. I had borrowed a car that I had assumed was a legitimate, like, this is this person's car. Not that person's car. It was a stolen vehicle. And so I get pulled over in a stolen vehicle, and I get my first F2 for going through and stealing a car. Unfortunately, on top of that, I was running somebody else's dope at the time, and so I actually got hit with 102 grams of methamphetamines as well. Whoa. Which is a possession with intent to distribute. So I had multiple felonies, and that is, all of a sudden I'm looking at real time at this point, right? And so, before it was always 2 weeks in jail, 30 days in jail, whatever, who cares? But now, like, those are charges that you got drugs in a stolen car in the same crime docket. There's a potential of going to prison. Maybe not necessarily, but it's a possibility. I'm not a first-time offender. I've got probably 12 or 13 drug-related misdemeanors. So for me, the option that I took was drug court, which, looking at it now, that was probably what ended up saving my life. I I hated it when I was doing it. I ended up being in drug court for almost 3 years because it is a very rigorous program. But I'll tell you what, they are hardcore. They if you mess up, they put you right back in jail and put you right back in treatment. There are no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right.
Before this had happened, I'd actually been to treatment 6 or 7 times. But drug court put me through treatment another 7 times. I've actually been through treatment 14 times total.
Wow.
And what's kind of interesting, I've never actually graduated from a treatment program. Because again, my ego gets the best of me sometimes. And so even though I was sober and I finally got to that point where I was sober and committed to be sober, right?
Yeah.
But I was just convinced that I didn't need treatment anymore. And I forced my therapist into a point where they were fed up with it.
Yeah.
And they had to kick me out for the simple fact that I was just a negative influence on the group as a whole. And I recognized that, I recognized that because I just, I got stuck in my ego.
Yeah.
And didn't want to be there. And I've always kind of worn my emotions on my sleeve. And that's just something that I need to be aware of when it comes to negative feelings that I'm putting onto other people. Right.
For sure.
And so I got kicked out of treatment, but this is the difference. The difference is that, instead of just getting kicked out of treatment and going back out on the run, I got kicked out of treatment and I walked down to the jailhouse and turned myself in and went through, and I ended up spending another 4 weeks in jail. And they were like, at this point, you've been sober for a year. Almost. I've been sober for like 11 months.
Right.
And I was like, man, I've been sober for this amount of time. They're like, okay, so we're not going to make you go back to treatment. We're going to let you try this thing out. And at first they told me that I needed to go to IOP, but because of the amount of sober time that I had, the IOP was like, your insurance is not actually going to take you. They won't cover it. And there's no reason for you to be in IOP. And other than drug courts trying to tell you need to be in IOP. And so drug court just ended up deciding, like, you know what, just go to 4 AA meetings a week and that's enough, and keep on doing your drug tests and all that stuff. And so that's kind of what it looked like. And so I'm a year sober, having done little to no recovery work at this point. And so, almost a year sober, 10 months sober, having done almost no recovery work, just jail and kind of finessing my way through treatment, telling people what they wanted to hear. And so now all of a sudden I'm grinding, man. Like I'm over here and I'm working, hitting my drug court meetings, hitting my drug court appointments, doing all this stuff. And I start getting really, really miserable. And I'm just not really 100% sure, what is going on there. And so at first what I tried to start doing is I tried to start going to meetings. And I love AA, but I happen to have a severe case of ADD. I cannot sit still. You guys can't see me, but I'm over here tapping my foot because if I'm not moving, then I start going nuts. Okay. And so it's super difficult.
I've got them buckled into the couch, guys. I got them strapped in there.
And so I can't sit still. Right. So sitting in an hour-long meeting was torture for me. Right. I did not love that. But I found this place. Have you ever heard of FTR?
Oh, yeah.
So I went through and I met Ian Acker.
Explain what FTR is for our listeners.
So what FTR is a place called Fit to Recover. And what they do is they bring fitness into treatment centers, and treatment centers go there. And it is a place where, we teach exercise and we work out together, but that's very secondary. What it really is a place where like-minded individuals with like-minded goals are able to get together and do something just a little bit different.
Right.
And honestly, it was the perfect thing for somebody like me who needed the connection. I needed those positive male role models so badly. I needed to learn how to have healthy relationships with women. And I didn't want to go to AA because it drove me nuts.
Right.
And so I go to FTR, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, bunch of positive male role models, healthy women that I can have healthy non-sexual relationships with. And that ended up being my community. And that is where my love of fitness ended up coming. Ironically, I'd been a certified personal trainer for a lot of years, because when you're in the military, it's actually, you can get that certification for free.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. The GI Bill covers it all. And,
awesome.
and so it's a pretty easy thing to do. And
Sure.
at the time I was just like, oh yeah, I'll teach people how to work out. but I mean, but now all of a sudden I've got this personal training thing, and I'm like, well, I'd like to teach some classes. And so I start teaching some classes at FTR. And when you start teaching there, they generally have you start out teaching treatment centers. And that's the only people that I ever taught when I was at FTR, because I loved it. I loved teaching my Odyssey House classes.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Such a fun experience. And all of a sudden, I find myself, because I'd been through the 12 steps at this point, and again, I'm not ever going to say anything bad about Alcoholics Anonymous. If anything, I think it is absolutely essential for every living human being to, at some point in time, go through the 12 steps. I think it's the most liberating thing that you can do.
It's a way of life, really.
Yeah.
You don't even have to, you take away the word steps. It's just, we should have a higher power. We should have a full inventory of our lives. We should make amends with people. We should give back.
Yep.
That's really what they are.
Yeah. Having that inventory and being willing to tell that inventory and go through that inventory with somebody else is probably the most difficult, but also that's the biggest thing in this world that keeps me sober. Yeah. Like, it's, the difference between me and the average person that I see is I have absolutely nothing to hide. Let's talk about my crime history. Let's talk about my drug addiction.
I like that.
Let's talk about all that stuff, because you know what? I guarantee you that there are who knows how many people going through the same thing and still stuck in that place of trying to hide it.
For sure. So I want to ask you something though. So you're at FTR. You're like, I found this is my niche. This is it.
Yep.
Was that a moment for you too as well, where you're like, hey, this is the course I'm taking from now on. I'm done with this life over here. The felonies, the homelessness, the misery. Is this kind of when, at least in your heart and mind, like, I know this is what I need?
It is. It's definitely when that happened. It happened for me at FTR, and I'll always have a lot of love for Ian Acker for providing that place.
Shout out to Ian.
Because it definitely that's what changed my life. It
awesome.
Gave me purpose, and I don't work at FTR anymore because there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there, and so I ended up venturing out of myself, but I don't have anything bad to say about FTR ever. I'm so grateful for what they gave me. But yeah, when I moved on from FTR, it was actually because Darcy and I decided to start our own business.
Yeah.
And we've actually been in business for 2 years now.
Oh, okay, cool.
And what we do is what I call us is we're food sponsors is really the best way to describe it. We are food and nutrition and fitness sponsors. And it's a little bit different than experiences that you may and or may not have with other people. We coach people on how to eat. And we don't necessarily structure their lives to force a closed-minded weight loss program. We actually go through and work with people to find something that works for them.
Okay.
And it's funny when you look at it, we honestly, we definitely utilize a lot of different things from the 12 steps, and we try and incorporate those things into fitness and nutrition. And so, obviously we don't consider ourselves higher powers at all. But at some point in time, if you want to make a change in your fitness and nutrition, you have to recognize that your way isn't working.
Yeah.
And I might be able to help find you a better way.
Right.
Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so we incorporate that. We talk about, a searching fearless moral inventory with food and fitness. Look, guys, we have to get to that place with food and fitness where having a cheat meal or whatever, or eating pizza or whatever, doesn't make you a bad person.
Right.
And so we actually have to really dive into your psyche in regards to food and nutrition and really figure out what's holding you back. Do you have shame around your food, eating, and exercise habits that we need to work through? And then we can get super honest and like, look, are you a person that tends to overeat, or are you a person that tends to undereat? And then we can actually dive into like, okay, When you have that feeling like you want to overeat, what can we do better? When
Yeah.
you have that feeling like you want to undereat, what can we do
What can we
better?
do? Yeah, I
Right?
love that.
And so it's just, we try and incorporate a lot of that stuff, and we try and get into the emotional side of food and the psyche. And then, so we're going through, and the way this business started is just because over time, people kept continuously were asking me for food advice and nutrition advice. And
Yeah.
before I know it, I'm actually helping like 15, 20 people just to help them.
Yeah. Right.
And I was like, I'm serving tables at Cheesecake Factory, and I don't necessarily love doing that.
Right.
And so maybe these people will pay me. And they did. I was like, okay.
You're like, hey, here we go.
You
Here's
know,
a good
just,
business.
and it wasn't a lot of money. It was a little bit of money, but it motivated them a little bit financially, and it motivated me. And all of a sudden my, quality of care goes through the roof, because I'm like, oh man, I'm getting paid for this. Like, this is a big deal. This is important. And then, the thing started growing, and that's always fun for sure. And we ended up starting the podcast, which is, we actually don't get paid from the podcast. And I think we're going to keep it that way, because the podcast is our way of trying to give back.
Right.
Like we want to give back and give people as much information as humanly possible.
Yeah, that's great.
Because we're completely aware that like a coaching service, a nutrition coaching or an online fitness coaching service is expensive, and not everybody can afford it. And so we just to be in line with our recovery and who we are as people, obviously you have to make sure that you're giving back to people.
For sure.
And so we do that with our social media content. And don't get me wrong, at times we end up getting clients from those avenues, but that's not the goal. The goal and the purpose is just to help people.
What's the name of your podcast?
It's the D&D Fitness and Nutrition Podcast.
Okay, cool.
And we do it with the and symbol in the middle, so instead of the letter. But yeah, it's the D&D Fitness and Nutrition Podcast. And it's been a lot of fun because we've actually gone through and we actually allow people to ask questions on our podcast group on Facebook, and we answer those questions specifically. And so people actually get in-depth insight to their current problems. And then we've also, so Darcy has a pretty long history with disordered eating. To the point where, at the age of 12, she had family members that were giving her fat burners to help her lose weight.
Right.
And it just created this whole thing. And so we've also had a number of mental health professionals on there talking about disordered eating and how to have that conversation with your teenagers and a healthy way to make sure that we are not accidentally starting this terrible rolling stone, because disordered eating is, guys, it can be pretty awful.
Yeah.
And so we work with a lot of people with the help of a therapist, of course. But we have a lot of young ladies that have, spent some time in the Center for Change or Center of Change, whatever it is. Center of Change.
Yeah.
And, they come to us, and we kind of try and help focus that obsessive food behavior into something healthy like exercise.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where, we've actually had a number of these young ladies on the podcast and, telling their story and saying, hey, these are some things as parents that maybe you don't want to say to your 16-year-old who's already struggling with some body dysmorphia.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
And so it's been an interesting conversation, and it's been a fun journey. And, don't get me wrong, I still very much have to work on my recovery, because every time I have a little bit of success, there's a big old wave of humility that's going to be right behind it, man.
Isn't that how it works?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Holy cow. I remember when I first decided and Darcy and I decided, like, hey, I don't have to work a full-time job anymore.
Yeah.
I can just be in this business. And I want to say a month later, we lost like 10 clients. And I was like, okay then.
You're like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah. I thought I was hot stuff, but
It's interesting when you say that, Danny. I was telling the clients here the other day, isn't it funny when we make a decision to do something good or the right thing, it gets tested almost immediately.
Yep.
And it's kind of what you're saying. Like, here we're going to do this, and all of a sudden, whoosh, where did the clients go?
Yep. It really got tested because I've always told people, and I shouldn't have said it because apparently God decided like I'm going to test it. But I said, I don't do this for the money. I do it because I love it. And immediately in that moment, I realized like, man, I better love this because I'm not making enough money right now. That's funny. That is just how that worked.
Yeah. Where are you guys located? Your fitness place?
So everything's online. We had a
awesome.
physical location for a long time, and we were training people in person, and then the coronavirus happened.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of gyms and fitness professionals that ended up going out of business, and there are some that still tried to force the issue with those in-person training sessions. And we decided not to.
Okay.
We decided that instead of trying to like force our natural narrative, we were actually just going to pivot a little bit and move everything to online. And so everything that we do is online coaching now. And so we actually have clients all the way from New York to California.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's super
really cool.
It's super, super fun. Like, it's been a really cool experience, and we're able to help as many people as we can, and it's really broadened the horizons. We actually have a coach now that works for us, and we have help and potentially looking at hiring another one. And so it's been a really, really cool experience. But yeah, everything's online.
That's great.
I mean,
a lot of people, that's kind of what people want to do nowadays. Just and I'm glad you've been able to kind of shift because of the pandemic. And some people unfortunately weren't able to get through that. And I feel bad for businesses and organizations that didn't make it, but glad to see that you guys are doing that.
Yeah. Honestly, it made it so that I could work home for the rest of my life. I don't think I'll ever give that up. Right. Like the chances of me working off of somebody else's schedule are not very good. I'll be honest with you. Yeah. Like I work in PJs generally. Like I'm sitting in shorts and a t-shirt right now, guys. Yeah. Like that's
you
how
look cash. Yeah, you look good.
That's how I live my life. I don't think I could give it up. But I've also I have to give back. That's always so important. I think that's very, very important to make sure that if you're in recovery, that you're trying to give back, and it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be anything. So, for example, all that I do for giving back is I volunteer. Have you ever heard of Warrior Strength?
Yeah.
So Warrior Strength is a place that's very, very similar to FTR. This one's run by Frank Young. And again, it's a sober community of people that are trying to help people in recovery and have a community of people. And so I just volunteer some time there and teach some classes for them. And that's all it takes, guys.
Awesome.
All that it takes is giving some time to something that's important to you.
Right.
It does not take money. It does not take, you don't have to go serve food on Thanksgiving. You don't have to go give gifts to the homeless on Christmas. Like, if that's not who you are, I just would find something that you're passionate about and that you love to do and give back in that way.
I love that. That's great advice. There's millions of ways that we can give back. And and that's great advice. Thanks, Danny. If there's someone listening to your story right now who is in a bad place, they're struggling, they're not sure how to get out, whether it's addiction, whether it's they're dealing with food issues, fitness issues, what's some advice that you could maybe give them right now they're listening to you right now?
So, the biggest piece of advice is that I can list off 20 different things that you could do to make that better. And if I do that, you'll try and do all of them. Okay.
Right.
And so that's not going to work. Instead, just choose one thing and make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with fitness, honestly, and especially if you don't know anything about the next direction to take, I would tell you to just start by drinking water 3 times that you would not normally drink water, and take a 20-minute walk every day. And when you have mastered that, then hit me up on some sort of platform to do something else. And with sobriety, it is honestly, it's 100% the exact same thing. Because, I mean, there's all these things in sobriety that so many different people want you to do. They want you to hit a meeting every day. They want you to read this passage in the morning. They want you to do this meditation. They want you to do this. Those are not bad things. They are so great. Mm-hmm. I am not a person who can handle 10 different things on my to-do list all at once. I don't do very well with that. Right. And so just choose one. If you want to read On Awakening every day, make that your thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
If you want to make sure that you pray every night, then make that your thing. And do that and let it form into a habit. And then start trying to tack on something else.
Right.
So yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is like, just choose one thing, keep it really, really simple. And if, don't expect perfection. Instead, just try and get really good at this, at drinking more water, taking more steps. That's it.
Beautiful. That's great advice. And I love that you said simplify it. I think what we do, especially in the addiction recovery world, we tend to overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
We overthink everything. So I love what you said there. Just simplify it. Let's do one thing, 20-minute walk.
Yep.
Drink 3 glasses of water when you normally wouldn't drink it.
Yep.
And then hit Danny up for some more stuff to work on.
Oh yeah.
At that point.
I'll tell you what, guys, like legitimately, I'll be super honest with you. I spend about 15 to 20% of my day doing things that I actually get paid for. Like that's just how my life is. I spend 80% of my day just helping as many people as I can because I'm well aware of the fact that nobody wants to spend money right now.
Right.
And that's so okay because I want to help anyways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I just want to help. And I've learned that the more I help, the more the universe ends up giving back.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, like I don't sell anybody. I don't ask for money anymore. Like everybody that pays me right now, it's because they're like, hey, I can pay you and I want more of your time. So I want to pay you. I'm like, cool,
I love
that works. I can do that. And if not, then I'm just going to help you as much as I possibly can with the amount of time that I have. And so if you reach out to me on social media or you reach out to me, through the podcast or you reach out to me through Darcy, if you know Darcy, then I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
I mean,
wow, that's awesome.
That's just what I like to do.
So how would they reach out to you? Like what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So I'm pretty active on Instagram. The Instagram is at the letter D, the letter N, the letter D, fitness and nutrition.
Okay.
I'm also pretty active on TikTok. And that one is sober, healthy, strong.
I like that.
And, those social media platforms are there. The podcast is the D&D Fitness and Nutrition podcast. If you listen to that, then you can get as much information as we can pump out in 2 episodes every week. And that's generally how people get a hold of me.
Love it. I love it. Well, I want to just tell you, thank you so much for coming here and spending some time with me. It means a lot to me because I know I do this to try to help other people, and your story is going to help a lot of people. You're currently doing that, and I do admire that you have. I guess what I want to say, you're so honest. I love how brutally you're just brutally honest, and I think that's probably why you're doing so well. You're not afraid to admit that I've struggled here, and here, Todd.
Right.
And I've got to recognize that. So your honesty is actually very refreshing to me.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only thing, we were talking about it before this started. It's actually the only thing that keeps me sober. Like that feeling of feeling like I have to hide something from somebody.
Not good.
Drives me nuts, man.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Like,
yeah.
I'll try and like, it's funny because so Darcy's like in charge of the finances in our relationship.
Yeah.
And every now and again, I'll try and sneak $100 purchase in there or something like that. And I usually only last a couple hours. I'm like, babe, I got to tell you something.
I did something.
I did it. I spent money on Amazon.
Yeah.
and it's just like, that feeling of like, it's funny. I have the coolest feeling, Todd, is, being in a relationship and I don't have to lock my phone.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and Darcy has she can like, if Darcy reaches over and grabs onto my phone and wants
don't
to
have
look
to
at something
panic.
on my phone, I don't care. And it's the coolest feeling in the world.
Wow,
Like, I can
love
leave
that.
my phone there with my we're getting married in August. I call her my wife because we've been together forever.
Yeah.
But I can leave my phone there and I just don't care. If I get a text message from a female, I know that it's not going to be inappropriate because I don't have those kinds of relationships.
Right.
It's just freaking awesome.
I love that. I think that happens so much where, the partner or the spouse or the boyfriend or girlfriend grabs the phone and then there's panic ensued.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then it becomes a big fight. You're like,
Yep.
Oh, here's my phone.
Yep. Couldn't
'Cause
care
you
less.
got nothing to hide. I love that, man.
Yep.
You can put your head on your pillow at night, and be at peace.
Yep. 100%. Just like, here, babe, will you look this up for me?
Wow, that's awesome.
We're
Well,
good.
Danny, you're amazing. Thank you so much for taking some time. Again, much congratulations to all your success and for being clean and sober and giving back. Thank you for doing that.
Hey, thanks, Todd. I appreciate you having me, man. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, there you go, folks. Another amazing guest. I told you, Danny Shelton. Please reach out to him. He is the owner of D&D Fitness and Nutrition. He is a man who loves to give back. He's been through a lot in his life. I always say addiction's your wake-up call to your greatness, and Danny's story proves it. He's been through a lot, but look at him now. His greatness is shining through, and he's not perfect, and none of us are, but I love his honesty. It's truly refreshing. And so there you go. Please share this with anyone you know, and thank you for all your support, and I can't thank you enough. I love you guys, and Danny, again, thank you for your time today.
Hey, thanks again, Todd. I appreciate it.